It's Lisa from Been There, Got Out. Today's guest is mediator Rebecca Stern from New Jersey. She's a neighbor in terms of states to us. And we are going to be talking about why your high conflict case requires mediation. I know a lot of people say, no, mediation is a joke. It's a waste of money. It's not going to work. Why should I bother? I've already done it. But Rebecca is going to talk about, if we can get her on here, it's going to talk about why it's imperative to have mediation when you're trying to settle your case, because you want to settle your case. You don't want to go to court and light your money on fire. There she is. Okay. I see you, Rebecca. Let me get you on here. We want you to keep as much power in your hands as possible. We want you not to be stuck on the court's calendar waiting for a judge to hear your case. Hi, Rebecca, what a relief.
There we go. Hi, Lisa. Great to see you.
How are you? Okay, so I was just saying that in our community of people dealing with high conflict exes and stuck in the legal system, that we are people who support trying to keep your situation out of court. But a lot of our audience thinks mediation is a complete waste of time because my ex is too high conflict and I'm not going to agree on anything. Just quickly, what is your opinion on that? And then you'll introduce yourself formally.
Absolutely. So I think that the high conflict cases are actually, I find them to be the most rewarding cases to mediate, because I know what I am saving you from. Because doing it the traditional way so often costs more money, spends more time, increases the drama, and people think that they're going to be validated and things are going to come out fair by going through that process. But so often that's just not the case. And mediating, we have more room to get creative, come up with solutions, and move the needle on the things that are stuck. So obviously I do the work because I think it's beneficial in those situations.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm so excited to hear what you have to say and to try to convince and persuade people why doing it outside of court is way more beneficial, especially for a high conflict situation. But first, can you officially introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Rebecca Stern. I'm a divorce and family mediator. I work nationally across the country with people on Zoom, and like we're talking about, in amicable but also in high conflict situations. I also do a lot of work specifically for families that have children with special education needs that have to be part of that parenting plan and part of the picture when they're negotiating. And I do parenting coordination and consulting as well.
Okay, so that's a lot. Now, you mentioned how people often think they're going to go to court and have the movie fantasy where the judge is going to rain terror down on their awful ex and everyone's going to walk out. Well, they're going to walk out feeling really validated and can happily and easily move on with their lives. But we know that that rarely, if ever, happens. So can you talk a little bit first about what mediation actually is before we start arguing its merits? Like, what does that mean? Because I think people might not quite understand everything that encompasses.
Sure. So just like there are a million different flavors of attorneys, there are all different kinds of mediation styles. So I'll just tell you a little bit about how I operate and do things. Most of the time, we're talking about two parties coming to the table together to work on developing what will ultimately become their marital settlement agreement. And that can mean doing a temporary agreement first. It can be dealing with just specific issues, or it can be the full global agreement. And I do some clients that are local to me, I'll meet with in person, but most of the time I'm on Zoom. And depending upon the level of conflict, we may meet jointly together in one Zoom room. We might punctuate that with private caucuses, just one-on-one here and there if there are conversations that it would be helpful to have not in front of your soon-to-be ex. And sometimes when the conflict is really ramped up, we'll do it completely in private caucus, so you're not even in a Zoom room with the other person. If there's any kind of real power imbalance, intimidation going on, that's usually the route that I'm going to want to take, so that you're feeling heard without worrying about what the other person's immediate reaction is going to be. I also, maybe a little different from some other mediators, I don't do all-day sessions. I know some people like to just stick around all day, try and iron something out. I find that people become really emotionally exhausted in the process doing it that way. So the most we'll generally meet is about 2 hours, because I want people fresh and feeling like they're making well thought out decisions. And I want you to sleep on it if you're concerned about something. I want you to ask good questions, bring in other professionals to collaborate with if we need to, because I want the agreement to be an enduring one. And you have to really believe that what you're signing off on is going to put you on higher ground at the end of this situation. You're going to feel empowered by it, financially secure. You know your kids are getting what they need. And to do that, I don't want anybody to feel under pressure to sign something. So of course we want to be efficient, move things forward as quickly as possible, but also not when you're feeling, under pressure about things, but rather when you feel like you've been heard, you've voiced your concerns, you know what the possible outcomes are, and you've made those thoughtful decisions based on good information.
So with that, we're putting together this huge online course, and there's elements that involve mediation. And I've interviewed different attorneys on this topic, and I get completely different answers. So let me ask you, as a mediator, do you think it's beneficial for clients to have their attorneys present in mediation, or to go in with just the two parties and you?
My favorite answer: it depends.
I knew you were going to say that, mediator.
I do think that when you go to mediation, you should have an attorney.
It's not completely frozen for everyone else.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
You're unfrozen.
Okay, good.
So in most situations, you want to have an attorney, but the kind of attorney is going to be very important. You want a review attorney, somebody who is settlement minded, who appreciates that you're in mediation and that your goal is to come up with a satisfactory settlement. Your goal is not to wind up in court. That's your last resort. That said, somebody who's a strong advocate for you if they need to be, and that you click with. You feel like you really understand when they're explaining what your legal rights are. You get it. You understand the way they're talking. You feel comfortable with them. They put you at ease instead of making you feel even more anxious. And whether or not those attorneys are going to remain completely in the background, meaning we'll mediate the agreement, then they'll review it. You can talk through any questions you have with them, and then they'll file it for you. Or whether we bring them right into the process and they show up to mediation with you, either from time to time or during the whole process, really depends upon the situation. I don't think there is a one size fits all. I think if it's helpful so that we are all on the same page, maybe we're saving time, because I want to hear your attorney in your jurisdiction, who knows how your judges tend to rule, may be able to add to the conversation by saying, look, they rarely do that these days. I've seen a lot of this. I've seen a lot of that. That can be helpful to save us time, so that we know we're really targeting in on a compromise that is within the realm of possibilities of what would happen if you were in court. So that can be really helpful. If somebody's just having trouble moving forward, highlighting for them what the process is going to look like if they don't reach an agreement, these things can be helpful to move things forward. But that said, it's also not always needed. I have plenty of matters where it's just the parties, and then their attorneys kind of come in at the end, or maybe when we're coming up with a certain proposal where they want to ask their attorney their opinion on, what do you think would be a good ask here? And then we bring them into the process. So I think it really depends upon the parties, how we're going to do it, how long we're going to meet, how often we're going to meet, if we're going to do it in private, whether we're bringing attorneys in, whether you need some other professional like a CDFA, a tax expert, a divorce mortgage expert. It depends completely upon what your goals are, what the biggest issues are. I want people always to be getting the most accurate information from the best source so they can make good decisions.
Yeah, and I like how you mentioned also, we talked about like bringing in other experts, that this is not something that happens in 2 hours. Can you talk a little bit about the process? Because people think, I went to mediation, I went twice, two 2-hour things, and we got nowhere, so I'm never going back.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will ask me, how long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost?
Right,
That's
of course.
probably the question I get the most. And I know people want a solid answer, and I can certainly provide a range of possibilities given the different things that are going on in their family. But it does depend on you. And I think if you're in a mediation process, if you have a good team of professionals that are the right fit for you, however long it's going to take is going to be shorter than if you didn't do that.
Mhm.
So, that's really the best thing that I can say, because I've had matters where the parties aren't arguing about anything. They don't have kids. The financial matters are not complicated, and we are done in 2 sessions. That certainly does happen. And it's still good to bring in a professional, because now they know that their agreement is filled with lots of different provisions that they might not have known it was wise to include had they not been talking to a divorce professional. And at the other end of the spectrum, I've had things take close to a year when there's a custody fight involved. There are several different businesses and really complicated financial questions and big numbers to deal with. So usually it's somewhere in the middle, I would say, and things take a few months. That's the most common situation, but it really depends what's going on. The goal is, whatever that timeline looks like, it is much more efficient than if you weren't doing it that way. And when I say not doing it that way, as opposed to just negotiating through attorneys, which is like playing a game of telephone,
Right.
or worst case, if you wind up in court having hearings about different issues, or what everyone tries to avoid, which is the litigation situation and having a full trial. Those things are going to take a lot longer and be a lot harder. It's not to say sometimes they're not the only possible way to tackle it, because sometimes you need to be in the legal system in order to move something forward if somebody else perhaps just will not budge and see the light of negotiation. But usually we try to do it as quickly as possible to get you to the other
Yeah.
side.
I know in my state of Connecticut, once you file, the state, well, they don't set it immediately, but you have a
Yeah.
year to try to negotiate. And I like having that. And we also like when our clients have a trial date,
Mm-hmm.
because we feel like then there's more pressure to negotiate and to mediate and get something settled ahead of time. When there's no date, then there's no deadline and things can go on for a long time. And you mentioned our audience is all difficult cases, so that year long that it'll take in mediation, I think people who haven't, that's more standard for us, but I think people somehow think that that's going to cost more money than going to trial. Now, I know with one of our recent clients who ended up going pro se because it's years post judgment, he figured he would try mediation as a pro se or self-represented litigant, even though his ex had an attorney, and they did it. And afterward, he was successful. And he said, you know what? The last time I went to court, it cost me $44,000 on one motion, and I got this done in mediation for $1,100. And I was like, yeah, it's still money. It's not zero. It's not free.
Right.
But the comparison, when you're in the system, you see like huge differences, right?
Absolutely. And I love the point you bring up about what filing triggers, because I think most people, unless you're fully in the process, don't understand how it works, don't understand what is going to happen step by step. And so I'm often explaining to people that our best case scenario, right, is that nobody has filed yet. You come to mediation, mediation is successful, you leave with your agreements, and then your attorney files for divorce. While filing your agreement, you go before a judge one time for maybe 10 minutes, say, yes, I'm in my right mind, and we've done all our homework already. Here it is. They rubber stamp things, you receive your order for divorce. That's a perfect process in my mind, but it doesn't always go that
No.
way. And if for any reason one of the parties is really dragging their feet and we're not able to make progress, then it may be wise for one person to file because it starts that clock ticking that you described in Connecticut as being a year. Every state has some sort of process by which when you file, that clock starts ticking. Maybe it's a year, in some states it's 2 years. And during that time period, what happens is the judge calls you in for case management conferences. They're called different things, different places, but it's basically a check-in where the judge says, okay, well, what have you guys been up to?
Mhm.
How are you doing with this? Where are you at with your agreement? And if you're nowhere, they're going to tell you to go to mediation.
Right.
Because ultimately they want you to control your own outcome. They're not an expert on your life. If they have to make a decision for you, they will. Odds are you're not going to like it. And there's no way to predict what that judge had for breakfast and how they're going to rule on something.
Right.
So when you're in mediation, you have a lot more control because you can talk about the reasons why something should be done a certain way and come up with something that's going to work for both parties.
Yeah, and when you were talking about like the dream scenario, that is rare, but I should mention from my own life that you can make progress in mediation even if you don't resolve everything. So for example, in my situation, early in the divorce process, so we did file, but I hired an attorney as a consult. So he was in the background and he specifically said, go to mediation. I don't want to be there because that'll get your ex all fired up if he thinks you have a lawyer and he doesn't have a lawyer. So at that time, we both were coming in unrepresented. So we went in, we had several meetings with the mediator, and we managed to get the parenting plan done, like an excellent parenting plan done. And so after, and of course, I checked with my lawyer. And before I even went in, I went over things with my lawyer for different plans, what would be great, what would be okay, and what to absolutely say no to. So it was like having that legal person in the background. And then I just went in as basically an actress who tried to do the best I could and then double checked with him. So when I told him that we got the parenting plan done and he reviewed everything, he said, you've saved yourself at least $10,000 in court just by doing this. Now, it did take a long time to get the financials done and we did have to go to court. We settled again at the last second. But still, it was tremendous amounts of time and money and energy saved on the custody part of it, because that's where we see so much drama and emotion, and emotion costs money, in particular in court.
Definitely. And so often people come in and they think we're arguing about everything. They're not arguing about everything.
Right.
Once we start talking, if there are 10 issues, they're arguing about 8 of them. Well, if we can iron out those 8 things, create an agreement around them, then you're only left with 2.
Right.
Just saved you a world of pain, and now we just have to find a creative solution for those last 2 items where you're not able to reach agreement. That's a much better position to be in than just feeling overwhelmed that it's everything. And to your point about the parenting plan, I always start with the parenting plan. If there are kids involved, we don't talk about money until we are done making all of those decisions about the children, legal custody, physical custody, the schedules, all the details around communication. We want to fill that out before we start talking about money. And very often I see people accomplish what you just described. The parenting plan is done. Ooh, okay, that's over with. Now we can talk about money. And we're not waiting until we're done with the parenting plan to start the work on the financials, but I can be collecting your financial information, consulting with a CDFA to analyze those things in the background while we're talking about what you're going to do about Thanksgiving and how that's going to work. So you can do it piecemeal, even though everything is connected.
Yeah. So let's stay with the parenting plan, because we feel like people have this idea that if you go to court, a judge is going to create a beautiful order that includes your parenting plan. We have seen disasters, and that is the number one reason our clients end up back in court, because a judge's order is not specific and doesn't make a lot of things clear, and so it ends up costing way more money. Can you talk about the benefits of creating a parenting plan in mediation versus going to court and thinking that some stranger is going to make a great decision for your family?
I think the best way I can make the point is to say one of the services I provide is parenting coordination, which is if people have a temporary agreement or if they're already divorced and they're having trouble implementing their parenting plan. It's a mess. It's not going smoothly. There's plenty of tension between the parents and it's just people aren't following what's in it. Then we mediate those issues essentially. The reason that even exists as an occupation for me is that they clearly have a parenting plan that doesn't have enough detail, where we haven't taken the time to figure out what's not going to work and put things in place to make it function better. So I'll give you an example. I work a lot with families who have kids with special ed needs. So if we're in mediation and we're coming up with a parenting plan, I'm going to ask the parents for a list of all the things that child needs to be supported throughout their day so they're thriving. Very much like if your child is in school and has, say, a 504 or an IEP plan that provides them accommodations during their day, we're going to create something like that for home. So you'll see parenting plans we come up with that have everything from the child's on medication or they have trouble with transitions, they have sensory issues that need to be dealt with this way, they're on a special diet. That finite kind of detail is going to be in the parenting plan.
And you'll never get it from a judge.
Is
Never.
Anything like that in there. We're going to include if you have a medical team or a mental health team that's supporting your child. Okay, following their recommendations may help you resolve disagreements when the two parents are not on the same page about what the child needs to best be supported. We can put all kinds of nuanced details in there in the parenting plan so it reads like an instruction manual for anyone who's caring for that child. And you're not going to get that in a courtroom. The courtroom wants to know what you, the parents, who are the experts on your children, think it should be, or what some outside clinical professional says is medically necessary. And in mediation, again, we have that freedom to be able to really understand what's needed for everybody to be okay.
Yeah. So you're on the East Coast like we are, and we found that mediators have a different role here versus in California per se. So here, a mediator can't push you to agree to something, right? Like you can't force one side. In California, I'm not sure what it's called, but some of the court-ordered mediation, the mediator takes the role of an evaluator, especially when children are involved, and makes recommendations. Have you ever heard of something like that?
Yeah, so it's a little bit different everywhere. When I mediate, I am not a decision maker in your situation. I'm helping you come to your own decisions. And, if I'm talking to people separately, one-on-one, I can usually find out what's keeping them up at night. And even when people feel like they're directly at odds and in direct conflict, if you talk to people, you find out it's usually not exactly the same thing. And so being not as emotionally entrenched in these issues, because it's not my life personally, I usually have a better vantage point to be able to say, okay, well, have you thought about this? What about that? And come up with something that they're actually both going to be comfortable with. In terms of pushing people to make decisions, for me, that might happen in parenting coordination as opposed to in mediation, and only after the parties fail to be able to come up with an agreement on their own. I think really we always want to be able to build something together, but we also need processes for, well, what if we just can't agree? No matter what tricks we use, we just can't reach an agreement. So what you're describing is similar to arbitration, where you have somebody in place who is going to make the decision for you if you can't make the decision for yourself.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about the importance of social emotional skills for a mediator, especially dealing with people like in our community where there's a lot of there's a high conflict personality,
Sure.
maybe two.
I think probably, and you want this with any divorce professional you're working with, I think people need to be able, first of all, to be calm and not take in other people's emotions on the spot, because people get pretty riled up. We're talking about, one of, if not the hardest thing you've ever gone through. And if their energy is going to get you all hyped up, then you're not really going to be in a good headspace for making decisions, because when is it the worst time to make a big, important decision? When you're not feeling emotionally stable. No
Mhm.
one who's going through divorce is feeling their best emotionally. So
Right.
you need somebody who can sort of calm that down and talk things through and bring people back to a better place so you can think things through calmly. And then also that you have a toolkit to be able to use when things do start to go in a bad direction, and to help clients use their own skills to be able to negotiate better for themselves. Using things like tactical empathy, remembering that the other person, every person wants to be heard. They want their emotions to be validated. I mean, they come in trying to convince you why they are so right and the other person is so wrong. If we stay stuck there, we're not going to make any progress. But if we can think about the fact that, okay, to get what I want, to get what I need, I do have to take a beat and think about what's going to make the other person okay, so that I can then use that in discussing a proposal to figure out how we're all going to be okay, even if I'm really hurt or angry with this person. It has to be something that's going to make everybody comfortable, or else it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. And I think also, as you're saying that, it's making me think about something we call universal agreements, like thinking about what both me and my ex have in common, especially for our child. So, for example, I might have ideas on how our child can get help for a mental health issue. My ex doesn't have the same ideas, but hopefully we can both agree, even if one of us doesn't actually believe this, that prioritizing our child's mental health is really important. So that's the issue. So we need to solve that issue together, right? Because we're both the parents. However much we can't stand each other, we both want to solve this problem. So how can we come up with a plan to get it done, even if it's not exactly what I think is best or what my ex thinks is best or worst, right?
Right. Say we're talking about a child who has some kind of challenge, and I'm saying I think that can be fixed by a certain kind of therapy intervention or a certain medication, and let's say dad doesn't agree with me. Well, me hitting dad over the head with it is not going to change anything.
Right.
So if I explain, okay, here's the problem, I think we all agree this is a challenge, this is a situation, something that needs to be resolved. Here's what I think. If you don't agree, okay, what do you suggest?
Right. Right. It's
You
almost
know,
like anchoring someone in that value and then being like, let's make the problem the thing that we have to work on rather than just you're my adversary.
right, reframe things. If somebody is, philosophically opposed to the idea of alimony and they say, I am just absolutely never paying this person's spousal maintenance, and the spouse they're talking about is someone who has no money, hasn't worked in 20 years, has perhaps some disability that prevents them from working full time. Reframe things. It's not about what we're taking out of your wallet. It's about solving a problem. Here's the situation. Here's what I have to work with. I'm sure you don't want me to be destitute. It's not going to look good to our child if you're in a mansion and I'm out on the street. So again, what do you suggest? I'm sure that's not how you want this to go. So how do you think we should resolve this? And, it may not get you all the way there, but it at least is the start of a conversation.
Yeah. At what point, let's say, would you think mediation might not be the best option? Like we often hear from clients that they're in a mediation session and their ex is attacking them and the mediator isn't doing anything about it and then they feel awful. So what are some like red flags either of mediation or a mediator that you think, I don't know if this is gonna work?
Yeah. So kind of two different things. I would say the only time I think mediation is off the table is if one person won't have a conversation. Period.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And there are people that just will not negotiate. They have in their head, I'm going to trial. I'm not participating in this. I refuse to be there. Well, you can't do anything with somebody who's not going to participate. You can try talking to them and explaining to them why it might be a good option for them to give it a try. But if they're just not willing to come to the table, then as you mentioned before with filing, we have to find a way to move the process forward. And that just might be necessary. In terms of where there's the kind of conflict where there's a power imbalance, I often explain to people that my role is to be neutral, and we want things to come out in an equitable fashion. But being neutral doesn't mean I'm always going to treat everybody exactly the same. People have different needs. So my goal is to level the playing field before we have a negotiation. And one way of doing that is to meet privately. If one person feels intimidated or threatened by the other person, I'm not putting them in a room together, because even with me there, they're glaring at each other, or they're intimidating the person in some way. Something they says has a hidden meaning. That's just not a good place for a negotiation. It's not a safe room for them to be in. So we may do that completely by private caucus, but I always want to level that playing field, whether it's one that was created by an emotional power imbalance, whether someone has much greater financial knowledge than the other person, whether someone doesn't have any of the passwords to even find the financial information. Whatever expertise one person has that another person may not have, I want to get that person educated behind the scenes so that we're all starting in the same place to have that conversation about the agreement.
Okay. Okay. What do you think about people bringing family members into mediation?
Not
Okay.
happening.
Sorry, and why is that?
I know some people do it sometimes.
No, I want to know. Like, let's hear it.
It's okay if you want to have somebody there for moral support. So
Mm-hmm.
long as the other person agrees, it's okay with them for you to have that person there. That's fine. But in terms of them being a peanut gallery, everyone in your extended circle, your friends, your family that love you and want to support you, they all bring their own biases,
Mm-hmm.
their own experiences to the table, and they may be hindering the situation completely unintentionally. They may be thinking they are being supportive of you by being hostile to the other person, or by suggesting proposals that we know are not going to fly. So I say vent to your family and friends as much as you want to. Let them be a sounding board. And if you do need somebody for moral support, that's okay. But I don't want to involve the entire family in a big negotiation, because it becomes too many cooks in the kitchen. And sometimes the client starts to not really think for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
because taking on, oh, this person has my best interest at heart, so they must be right. And they may not know everything. They only know what you've told them. They've only heard probably one side of the conversation, and they may bring their own biases into it and complicate things further. So I think they play a really important role in you developing your support network while you're going through the process. But usually they tend to muddy the waters when they become part of the actual negotiation, whether that's in the mediation or even behind the scenes. You have to be able to really try and filter those voices.
Yeah, so important. And there's something called a negative advocate, which is like people who unintentionally, they're so supportive and loyal to you that they don't see the big picture and the impact decisions have on your children and the rest of your family. So, yeah, it certainly makes sense to
You
me.
want lots of positive advocates. You want to build a team with an attorney, a mediator, maybe a coach, a financial expert, that are on your page and that really want to see you get through the process smoothly. But those negative advocates, it's not coming from a bad place. It's usually coming from a place of love, and they think that they're supporting you. But when they're saying, like, F that person may be the other parent to your child who is half both of you.
Right,
That may
right.
make it more difficult to actually act in the best interest of your child, whose best interest it's in to tamp down on that conflict and have you guys actually be, on smoother terms with one another, no matter the situation.
Right. And that's the other thing about keeping the conflict out of court as much as possible. Like litigation, it's difficult no matter what, but litigation makes things far worse because court adds trauma to the situation and kids absorb that conflict.
Yeah.
So mediation is an opportunity to make it less, because you don't even know what you're taking home with you when you come out of court. Everyone's affected.
Absolutely. I think it's really clear from this side of the table that it's not a divorce that messes up kids, it's the conflict between the parents and their inability to work through that conflict that really hurts the kids. So first and foremost, that's what we're trying to do, is calm things down. So all those positive advocates that are working toward that with you, that's going to help. The negative advocates who are amping up the conflict, they may adore you and want to help you, and it's unintentional. But if they're saying negative things about the other parent, and if they're trying to get you to, take things to a higher level in terms of litigation, they may not actually be helping you at all.
Right. So also, what do you think is the benefit of, let's say, going to mediation as opposed to me just going on a coffee date with my ex to try to work things out ourselves?
So I call that a kitchen table divorce.
Really?
And if you guys are communicating well enough that you think you can do that, you're going to have a really smooth, quick mediation. But you shouldn't do it on your own, because there are just too many things you would not know are helpful to put in your agreement unless you have a divorce professional walking you through those things. There are so many different terms that you can put in, or things you can anticipate, so that you're not back to something else in the future. And I think it's really helpful to have somebody just educate you. It's like a laundry list. And I've never yet had anybody come in and they really knew every single item that should go in there. So I think doing it yourself, or just with some guidance on the internet, is perhaps not enough, really, for most people to be able to put things in the agreement that 5-10 years down the road, they're going to be really happy that they did put in the agreement.
Yeah, I interviewed an attorney recently who was saying that's wonderful to start off with that attitude, but there's going to be a day probably where somebody starts dating someone else, or who knows what's going to happen when things go sideways. You need to make sure that you have something solid, because then it'll avoid having to go back to court and like clean up the mess that you made by not putting together, let's say, an airtight parenting plan or agreement.
Absolutely. And I think working with a professional, a lot of those things you might not know to put in. Some of them are subject oriented, but a lot of them are a matter of giving your agreement some teeth. You're getting along now. Okay, so we're making all these decisions about our kids. We're in agreement. This is how it's going to go. Excuse me. What happens if down the road you don't agree? There should be something in your agreement that says what happens if you can't resolve a disagreement
We
about
changed that to not if, but when.
Right. At some point, you are not going to be on the same page about everything. You're getting a divorce. There's a reason.
Right.
You
Right.
haven't been completely on the same page about absolutely everything. So to avoid that blowing up into a problem, if you put in something like, okay, if we don't agree, here's how we're going to handle that. Here's how this would be resolved. Or if somebody's non-compliant with something that they say now they're of course going to do, and then life changes and they don't do it. What happens when somebody is non-compliant? Putting that in. Or what happens when
Oh, wait a second, Rebecca, you just lost volume.
they get a new partner and how that's going to work, or how you want that to work with your kids, or when somebody wants to move several years from now. There are just so many things that we can talk about now, even if your head's not there yet. I mean, you could have toddlers and you may want to put something in your agreement about what happens when they go to college. You're not thinking about that now. You have a lot of other things on your mind. But believe me, when they're a junior in high school, you're going to be really glad that you put it in your agreement how you're going to handle college.
Right. And even that you are going to handle college, hopefully together,
Right.
rather than like, oops, I didn't know that my state doesn't require somebody else to pay for it, which people
Right.
often find out too late. And had
Right. And
they put in their agreement that they would each be responsible, that would protect you.
exactly. And, while I can't tell you if you went to court exactly what a judge would do, I can let you know here's the range of possibilities, and that can help guide the conversation. So no matter what the topic is, we know, on the low end of something, this is what's going to happen. On the high end, it's here. So we know that your agreement should land somewhere in the middle there.
Yeah, great. So any other little tips or mindset tricks people should think about when they are resisting mediation because they're just thinking, I don't think my ex is going to agree to this. I don't even know why I should bother.
I would say don't make assumptions, ask questions when you're in mediation. But really, the advice I always wind up going back to for people is take a breath and take care of yourself, which may seem not on the business end of things, but it really is, because your decisions are going to be better. Your agreement is going to be better if you're taking care of yourself. If you are angry, if you are sad, if you are overwhelmed by it, do the things that make you feel good, because this is going to be over at some point. So exercise, take a walk, hang out with your friends, do all the things that make you happy and feel alive, because just because you're going through this process doesn't mean life is stopping. And you want to be, your best self as much as you can be to show up for the process. And I think people sometimes forget because you feel like you're in crisis mode. But taking care of yourself is the best thing you can do for your kids, and it's the best thing you can do for your outcome.
Yeah, we always say to our clients, especially because we focus on legal abuse, and part of that is that this takes a lot longer than you want or could ever imagine. And there's no way to make it end fast, but hopefully you can get professionals and support involved that we say can turn it into background static, because you can't afford to just put your life on hold as you're moving through this process.
Absolutely.
So yeah. But thank you so much, Rebecca, for coming on and offering hopefully a persuasive alternative to why people should seriously consider mediation, especially if they have these high conflict cases, because you don't want to be back in court. You need an airtight agreement. Like, this is a protection. It's going to save tons of money and time and energy, even though it's going to feel painful. Like everything else is going to feel painful right now. That's unfortunately normal.
None of it is what we anticipated, expected, wanted, but we've got to get through it the best way that we can. And mediating it, I think, really does save people a lot of time and money and heartache.
Yeah. So how can people find you, Rebecca, and remind them you don't just do your home state?
Yes, I work all over the country with people. They can find me through my website, www.rebecca-stern.com, or they can just email me at rebecca@pearlmediation.com. And yeah, I work with all different kinds of situations across the country.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll be back together again, because I want to talk to you about parenting coordination in particular, since that's very common in our clients' world as well. But thank you so much again.
Great talking with you.
Okay, you too. Bye.